Hey, what's going on, everybody? Max here with BB, and today for 10 Minutes Max, we're going to be diving into the art of pair trading to determine when tops are in and when bottoms are in. Guys, if you've ever had questions about how to actually pair chart in TradingView, how to actually use it as alpha to identify critical levels and pivots within global markets, not just crypto, this is the video for you guys. Leave me a like, leave me a comment, do something, guys. A lot of people start with, and for good reason, just looking at something like Bitcoin USDT. And what they fail to realize when they're just charting normally is that this is actually a pair chart, right? So this is Bitcoin, but it's Bitcoin USD, right? So this is Bitcoin valued in dollars, okay? So we all kind of naturally default to denominating assets, whether it's Apple stock, Nvidia stock, Ethereum, whatever it may be. We just kind of default to the dollar, right? But there's also a lot of hidden alpha in, for example, swap out the dollar for, the euro. And Bitcoin euro looks really the same, but it's going to be slightly different if we put them side by side. Like the top will look a little bit different here. I could put them side by side, but I don't want to waste too much time because that's not really the point of the video. But I guess I just wanted to point out that like there are all these other pairs that, we can look at. Let me just give you a super obvious example here. So we're going to put up kind of normal Bitcoin down below. And when I say normal, I mean normal in the sense of like this is what people default to. And then this is Bitcoin JPY. So Bitcoin denominated in Japan's fiat currency versus the dollar. So up top, we have this one is JPY denominated, and this one is USD. I'm going to go quick here because, again, this is not the point of the video, but I just want to make sure everybody like fully understood what they're actually doing. So this is Bitcoin JPY up top, and then this is from that same pivot point, Bitcoin USD. Do you see how they're actually different charts? Like if you're zoomed way out and you're just kind of looking at them, you'd be like, oh, they're the same. But actually, when you denominate Bitcoin in a different fiat currency, the chart looks materially different, right? So you are actually using a pair chart whenever you just look up like Bitcoin USD. But that's not the point of this video. I just wanted to make sure that you fully understood that actually you are pair charting. And I'm going to teach you right now how I am using pair charts to help determine the likelihood of bottoms and some of the pair charts for primarily crypto that I find to be incredibly important, okay? And again, you can use these concepts and really kind of create anything that you may want on your own because we all look at different things. We all watch different tickers, different crypto pairs, whatever it may be. So let's start with Bitcoin. There's this big debate going on right now about, whether the bottom is in, right? I've seen a lot of people, myself included, that will draw a line like this and they'll be like, all right, that's, support, the bottom is in, like never coming back below here. Maybe we do this. Who knows, right? But for me, the USD chart is kind of messy, right? And the reason is, the USD chart is great, but you're also valuing something like Bitcoin in a fiat currency that supply is constantly changing. Its valuation globally is constantly subjected to geopolitical tensions, things like that. I mean, prime example would be if you just look at DXY, which is not just the US dollar, this is actually primarily euro. This is like a fiat currency basket. It's made up of a handful of different currencies, primarily euro and dollar. But it's like you can see in the past handful of years how much the valuation of this currency basket has fluctuated. So it's like you're also looking at Bitcoin's value, but you're denominating it in something that's constantly moving, which is then kind of manipulating the view of like what is Bitcoin's real worth. And I actually think the best thing to do is to look for pairs against things that have more of like a benchmark value, or pair your asset against a basket that is kind of perceived to have value or grounding in fundamentals, because like the dollar doesn't really have fundamentals. It's just like here's how much of it is in circulation, and then like let's pair it against other countries' currencies, and then let's throw in interest rates, which again are more variable. It's like it's pretty messy, okay? But where I'm going with this is like What do we really care about at the end of the day? Well, we want Bitcoin to go up in dollars so we have more dollars, but you really want Bitcoin to go up, or crypto, whatever it may be, or an individual stock. You want them to go up against the basket of the best companies in the world. Why would you hold Bitcoin if it doesn't look promising or bottomed potentially or trending higher against the S&P 500, right? Or the Nasdaq, right? The benchmark for investing, arguably. Everybody maybe has a slightly different one, but I think it's a pretty fair thing to suggest. So let's do this. What we're going to type in right here, and you just pull up your chart, okay? You just pull up any chart and you just start typing BTC, and we'll do the USD pair. Okay, Bitcoin USD, pick Bitstamp. It's got plenty of price history. And then you're just going to hit the slash divide. And then we're going to type in S&P 500. You could do SP 500. You could do SPX. If you want to do the NASDAQ, you could do QQQ. It doesn't really matter. It's all kind of the same thing. So what we're doing here is we're valuing Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin USD, but it's denominated against the S&P 500, which I guess is also USD denominated. So the two, the numerator denominator cancel out. We basically have Bitcoin paired against a giant basket of the best companies in the world. So you do this, you just type it like a math equation, and then you click return or enter. And here is how Bitcoin S&P 500 looks. Not great, right? So let's take a look at it, right? We did technically make a new high, right? This cycle. We did get above that previous high, but we haven't really done too much since then, right? We kind of deviated it and then broke back underneath. And, as far as I can tell, looking at this chart, like let's just draw it out in an uptrend, okay? Here's your bottom. Here's your uptrend. We're just going to do like ultra high time frame, okay? So there's your uptrend right there. And then you can see right here below this prominent low, we had a market structure break. Okay. So we finally made a new low, right? So there's our prominent low. Again, all these dots are just weekly, swing points on this pair chart. And then below here, we actually put in a new low, right? So right now we're in a weekly time frame downtrend against the S&P 500, right? Which I would argue is a much better way to value, like, what is Bitcoin's inherent value right here? Like, do we want to value in the dollar? Yeah, that's important. We all want to have more dollars, but it's like there's also an opportunity cost to holding Bitcoin. If it's going to underperform arguably the safest place to park your money in the entire global economy, which is the S&P 500, statistically speaking. So this is kind of the view for Bitcoin here. And like we could go back and look at last cycle and do the same thing, right? Here's your bottom, maybe say like right there, weekly time frame. Actually, let's stop it right here. We'll change the color. So let's just go back and see what happened last cycle, right? This is a little messier. We had COVID and stuff, but like, still very much so in a weekly time frame uptrend. And here, I'll just put it in log mode so you can see it a little more clearly. Like, a little messy. COVID kind of threw us off. I'm going to count this as, higher low, kind of internal, shift here, but we're going to count it. Uptrend, right? Uptrend. And then what happened over here? Oops. Over here had a shift of market structure, right? Against the S&P 500. Market structure break. And we had a shift right there. And then what I find to be super interesting is, after that shift, we basically like didn't make a new high, right? So if you were to just look at Bitcoin USD, Bitcoin actually against the dollar pair made a new high over here. But against the S&P 500, it did not, right? This bounced up into a shoulder. So very different charts, right? If you were watching this one, probably would have been kind of a telltale sign of like, hey, not so great. But anyways, like just kind of looking at this, right? You can see that like you're in an uptrend bull market, you're in a bear market, you're in an uptrend bull market, bear market, and some of these are maybe subjective. Like this one is like an internal shift, like didn't make a new low here yet, but obviously continued on, printed 3 consecutive lower highs, 1, 2, 3. But anyways, I think you get the point, right? Like the point is right now against the S&P 500, Bitcoin is in a downtrend. So there's kind of two ways to look at this. You can say, all right, I should own more stocks than I do Bitcoin right now. Or you can say, let's try to figure out where that bottom might be because I want to catch the next green push, right? This is when, Bitcoin from the bottom will outperform stocks by a 10x or more, right? Last cycle, slightly less, 5x, right? That's crazy, right? To outperform something that's returning at this pace, like, an average of 10 to 20% per year easily. Recently, it's been a lot more than like the traditional 8 to 10%. To outperform that by 5x or 10x in the matter of a couple years is huge, right? So that's the critical thing to identify is like where can this bottom be, right? And that's a very, very tough thing to do. So something to consider is like let's look at the last cycle. Something to consider is like how do bottoms typically look? How do tops typically look? A bottom typically is sort of like they walk it down a bit. They walk it down to send it higher. And with tops, they kind of walk it higher to send it lower. General rule of thumb. Okay. Over here, they kind of walked this higher to send it lower. It's not always perfect, but generally that's what they do. Okay. Now looking at the very bottom last cycle, this was kind of just a range, right? But we ended up having FTX and then we deviated that. And upon this reclaim, that was pretty solid confirmation that, we were going to be bottom. Kind of progressing through the cycle, they walk it lower to send it higher. They walk it lower to send it higher. And again, this is the pair. And this is just typically what happens, right? They walk this lower to send it higher. But then this one, they kind of walked it higher to send it lower. And then over here, again, they walked it slightly higher to send it lower. And right now, the thing that I don't love is that they're kind of walking it higher, right? Like these lows are completely unswept. They kind of have walked this higher. We don't need to necessarily come back and clean that up. Like a prime example would be over here. We never came back to sweep this low. And I would argue they kind of walked this higher, but then there's another case to be made where like they kind of walked it a bit lower at the same time. It was very different, right? It's just that, right now to me against the S&P 500, it's like what are you going to do here, right? It's like I could kind of even take this trend line and throw it against these lows and be like, "Oh, we're like about to break down against stocks again," right? And maybe that's just a little breakdown. Maybe this is it. Maybe it's a little bit more. But I think it's something to consider, right? I think it's definitely something to consider. So, I just kind of wanted to walk you guys through like what are some alternative approaches to valuing Bitcoin, right? Do you want to just look at the USD pair, or is there really some alpha in trying to determine like, are we going to outperform stocks or underperform stocks? And here we can throw on some other things. Let's look at total. So everything in crypto, not just Bitcoin, divided by QQQ, right? Total paired against QQQ actually looks a bit more interesting to me because total against QQQ, to me, at this point, looks like you're basically getting walked lower, right? You're getting walked lower, which we just went over the example of like sending it higher to send it lower. This to me looks like they're walking it lower, right? They're absolutely walking it lower. And if we go to, different time frames, like this is the daily, so we removed all the wicks just looking at a line chart. It's like we're basically deviating that low right now, that looks pretty interesting. Like, this actually looks a lot more interesting to me than just Bitcoin paired against the S&P. This to me looks like Bitcoin is getting walked lower. And in my experience, it's not completely uncommon to see like this liquidity bleed down, like this total just like bleed walk down, resolve into something much more expansive to the upside. It kind of reminds me of this, right? And by the way, this also happened in summer. This was summer of 2021. So I don't know how I feel about that happening. I mean, I'd love for it to happen, right? I would love to see like this turn into just like a bear trap to the downside and then they rip it to the upside. So, I guess the thing is, I'm just telling you to watch these pairs, right? I'm telling you to watch these pairs. I don't have a lot of conviction either way right now. And the reason is like there's a lot of contradictions in the market. Like stocks are ripping face while Bitcoin is just doing nothing. And then also like total QQQ basically is at like the biggest support level we have, on the entire chart. This is huge. So there's a lot of contradictions in the market, right? And the contradiction is it's incredibly obvious when you just look at something like this. Here's Bitcoin up top, and here's QQQ down below. I mean, look at this. This is crazy, right? Like stocks, new all-time highs, ripping, and Bitcoin, from more or less the same spot, is down significantly. Like from Bitcoin's all-time high, right now it's down 40%. And from that same level, stock's all-time high, which again came slightly after crypto, but basically same level on the chart. Stocks are up 10%. So that's a huge swing, right? So it's a bit of a tricky spot to, sink your feet in concretely and say like it's time to start ripping or it's time to start dumping, but it's like you should be watching these pair charts. You should absolutely be watching these pair charts, like ETH, paired against the S&P 500. This is a huge level for ETH against the S&P 500. I mean, this is like the mega demand of mega demands right here. I mean, this is like this was, back in your bull market of 2020, 2021, first pit stop before expansion. Bear market 22, second tap, bear market 22. Kind of front ran, but same level in April of 2025, tariff sell-off. This bottom here so far. I mean, this level is like, I don't want to see what's beneath it, right? I do not want to see what's beneath it because what's beneath it is right here, okay? So it's like there's two ways that we would ever reach that level for ETH against the S&P. We would reach that level if stocks just melted up and crypto kept ranging, or stocks kind of kept doing what they're doing and Ethereum just nuked, right? So it's like we kind of need to hold this level, right? Which is actually typically an area where I love to step in and be like, we need to hold this level, lose this level or it's lights out. Not to be the meme, but it's true. So there's just a lot of really important pair charts that like you're looking at this thing, you can see clear as day, we need to hold this level. Where if you're just looking at the ETH USD chart, we don't have that same level on the chart. That level on the chart is like here, right? That's where this line would start, is more or less like right here. So it's different, right? But that's where the hidden alpha is. But guys, thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to the channel if you are new here. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.